I'm Gavin, and welcome to MLS Fantasy Picks. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video, we'll go through a round recap of round 4. We'll look at some of the fantasy learnings from round 4, as well as key considerations for our next round of round 5, and then of course, player picks and tiers. So looking at round 4, it was quite an awful round for me. If I ever do worse than the average, that's a pretty bad, it's a pretty bad week. I don't know if it's my worst week ever, but yeah, rough round for me last week. So I had a week rank of 5,798. Overall rank currently sits at 530, and my total score is at 254. So let's look at where we went wrong. So I ended up even having to pull a 4 from the bench because my switcheroos on the bench failed pretty bad. Cornell, they lost their clean sheet pretty early. Forestburg only got me a 4, Buonga the same with only a 4. So I was sort of banking on my field players to perform, but unfortunately, that was not the case. Freese and NYC, I think a lot of us were looking at them. They scored an own goal for New England's goal, so they kind of shot themselves in the foot there. Wagner, a strange game against Nashville. Dugan for Minnesota, I looked once, he had a 10, and it dropped all the way to a 2. I think he had like an own goal or something. SKC scored a bunch of goals in the second half. Rough times. Makanya, I would have appreciated 2 points from him, but I think in like the 109th minute or something crazy, he got a red card for throwing a ball in someone's face. So this is just how my week was going, so whatever. And then Hartzell with a 6, honestly, not awful. Acosta with a 2, losing a bit of faith here in Dallas. Dreyer, I was going with like a safe floor. I was expecting a goal contribution, so 5 is okay to get me that 10 with the captain's armband. Mihailovic as well. Look to see a bit more from him than a 4. Messi, of course, with the 10, held out for him in the end. And then Benteke, honestly, without a goal contribution and getting a 6. This is different this year. He's normally a guy who'll give us a 2 if he doesn't score, so it's good to see. All right, enough for round 4. I want to move on. And taking a look at our MLS Fantasy Picks leagues, I'm currently sitting 32nd. So a bit of a gap here. Looks like 36 points from Sabi Time. A great score of 67 last week. So up top 5, we've got Sabi Time, Clover Street Ultras, Darda FC, Daniel's Dogs, and Messi Golden Boot 2025. So congrats to you all with some great scores last week. And looking at our MLS Fantasy Picks head-to-head league, some similar names here. So we've got Sabi Time, Clover Street Ultras, Billy Joel's Watermen, Arsenal 911, and Husaria. So where did I end up? I got my first L of the season. So I'm at 31st right now. So 3-0-1. But yeah, congrats to our top 5. So if you look at our fantasy learnings from round 4, I'll just do a quick recap for each of the matchups. So for this one, Orlando is still, legit. Ojeda especially, keep an eye on him. Red Bull, I want to see a bit more from. Gengar might be someone to look at moving forward. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but he looks like the Pokemon Gengar, so I'll call him that for the season. Toronto versus Chicago. So I know I've been holding out on Kuipers. Kuipers is legit. He's scoring. I think this new setup is working out well for him, so I think he is someone to keep an eye on this season. And then, of course, Bernadeschi, the only guy for Toronto. I'm still not looking at Austin, even though I got that 1-0 victory. LAFC, keep an eye on them. They're going through a lot with their tournaments. Charlotte, still strong at home. Keep an eye on them. And then Cincy also balancing a lot right now with their tournaments. DC, I was surprised. Ended up 0-0. Benteke, close to getting a goal. I think it was called off due to VAR. Still avoiding Montreal. NYC, Martinez looks great. Avoid New England. SKC in Minnesota was a bit of a goal fest. I still like Minnesota's back line with their cheap options, and we'll touch on it later in the video, but they've got a few call-ups, so we'll want to keep an eye out on those players that may get a start this week due to some others being called up for international duty. Dallas and Vancouver, let down by Dallas here. Vancouver we'll keep looking at, especially with the rotation and call-ups and things like that, looking for those budget-friendly picks. RSL Houston, I'm still avoiding RSL. Houston, I feel like McGlynn and Bossy are pretty solid. St. Louis, again, keeping strong with their clean sheets. Their defense is 1-2 back. Seattle, Rusnak is still your guy. Not much from a defensive standpoint. San Diego let in their goal, so they tied 1-1 versus Columbus. I still like Dreyer, and Columbus is always a tough matchup. Whoever's playing them, it's not going to be easy. And then San Jose, Colorado, I expected a few goals here. Espinoza had a great week. Colorado, Mihailovic, Navarro, still your guys. This was a controversial game, penalties and all that such. Hani's looking better, so I'll keep an eye on Nashville. They're looking like a more fantasy viable team. Philly as well, keep an eye on them. I know it was a bit of a strange game, and we'll talk about it later in the video. A lot of call-ups for international duty, so may want to keep an eye out for them this coming week. And then Portland, LA. I feel like the Galaxy is starting to look a little bit better, but away at Portland, you only score 1 goal. Not great to see. DaCosta still looks good. And then Atlanta. This Atlanta team looked completely different now that Lennon and I forget Amador is back. So yeah, they looked great. Again, Miami still pulling out victories with or without Messi. So key considerations for the round. So for our first few rounds, we haven't had to worry too much. We've had CONCACAF Champions League, but now we've got international call-ups, which will take a good amount of players from different teams. A lot of starters as well, which may free up some like backup goalkeepers, backup defenders, field players that may not normally get the start, but are friendly from a budgeting standpoint. So this, creates a lot of opportunity, and I'll talk through that in my player picks. U.S. Open Cup, I wanted to call it out, but it's still early days of the Open Cup. A lot of the MLS teams that are competing won't be playing, most of their starters, but something to keep in mind. Miami and New England are on bye this week, so you can use those players if you need to scrub someone, but don't play them as they won't be playing if you're looking for a starter. And then injuries and suspensions, as always, keep an eye out for those articles posted by MLS. So getting started with our player picks for premium keepers. I like Willis. Obviously, they're playing Montreal, so Montreal hasn't looked so great. Nashville is looking better. So he's a more expensive option, but if you have the budget, could be a good look. And then also Lloris against SKC, who have been struggling. Yes, they scored 3 goals, but I feel like LAFC is still pretty strong defensively. And looking at your standard keepers, I do like Kalina this week. Charlotte at home is quite strong defensively, and they're playing San Jose, so I like that matchup. And then you also have Dos Santos. I know San Diego let in a goal against Columbus, but they are playing Austin, who scored a set-piece goal against LAFC. So I still like San Diego this week as they've been pretty strong defensively. Now looking at our budget keepers. So as I mentioned before in the earlier part of the video, I feel like this is a good opportunity to utilize those, backup goalkeepers where a lot of the starters have been called up for international duty. So I've got the backup keeper here for Minnesota. I believe, what's his name? St. Clair has been called up for Minnesota, as well as the Red Bull keeper Coronel. So you could look at the backups for Red Bull New York. Some other options as well you could take a look at is the Columbus backup. Columbus keeper Schulte is on international duty. And then you've also got the backup for Berkey, so St. Louis, Lunt. So St. Louis kept their clean sheet record pretty strong. And they're going to be playing a Union squad who are going to be without Gazdag, Blake, Danley Jean-Jacques, Bueno, Baribo, Westfield. So it's going to be a different Union squad that you are used to seeing. So St. Louis could pull off a clean sheet even though they are going to be away in Philadelphia. So I feel like your keeper situation, this is a good opportunity to utilize those backup keepers with international call-up. So looking at our premium defenders this week, so similar to what I called out for Kalina and Charlotte. So Malanda at home against San Jose. Yes, he's quite expensive, but he's, out of all the Charlotte defenders, gets the most amount of bonus points. Then we've got Paulie Hlongwane for Minnesota against LA. So I feel like that's a good matchup against a struggling Galaxy squad. Hlongwane got involved on the attack last week, so I'll see that continuing. And then Orjano as well for Cincinnati against Atlanta. So I think Cincinnati will be missing Denke, so we'll see what up top looks like without him. They'll probably throw in Yuya Kubo, but I expect to see him involved in the attack. And then Kessler for St. Louis, also the main points getter for the St. Louis defense. As I said, it will be a different Union squad than we're used to. So yeah, good option there. And then the last premium defender I would call out, not displayed here, is Shaberko for Columbus, so he also very high bonus points for Columbus and playing New York City FC at home. Now looking at our standard defenders, so I've got Lovett's called out here. I believe he's on some set pieces, and as I stated before, I like the matchup at home against Montreal. Blackman, one of your more expensive Vancouver defenders, but they're up against Chicago, and Vancouver's been looking pretty solid. And then I've called out Chris McVeigh as well. I still like San Diego against Austin, who haven't looked too strong on the offensive side of things, and I think they will be missing Azuni due to international call-ups. And then Akil Watts, depending on if he's starting. I like that matchup, unfortunately. As a Philly fan, Philly will be missing a lot of their attackers, and St. Louis is quite strong defensively. Moving on to our budget defenders. So this is probably where I'll be looking to save some cash this week due to call-ups. So I still like Dugan, even though he kind of failed last week with an own goal. He still had that assist, and I like that matchup against the Galaxy. Bombino surprisingly got the start for San Diego, so if he's starting again, it could be a late switcheroo option. And then just in general, I feel like there's a lot of cheap Vancouver defenders. So Tate Johnson, Ocampo, I'm not sure what the situation is going to look like in Vancouver with call-ups. So far, it looks like Ahmed, Kubas, Vite, and Brian White have been called up, so we'll see what the back line looks like for Vancouver, but it's a good matchup at home against Chicago. So yeah, keep an eye out on lineups, who's being called up for international duty, as it may free up some of those cheaper options this week. Now looking at our premium midfielders, so I like Rusnak at home against Houston. We'll see what that Seattle lineup looks like, but it's a good matchup, though he is quite pricey at 10.3, but he's got a solid floor. One of my favorites this week is Evander at home against Atlanta. He's looking better from a fantasy standpoint. I feel like he's starting to click with Cincinnati. They will be out without Denke, but I still feel like with Kubo and the rest of the squad there, he'll be all right. And then Ojeda, that's a great matchup against DC, and Orlando still looking strong on the attack. Ojeda in the central everything. Hani's looking much better against a struggling Montreal squad. And then some honorable mentions as well. Dreyer, of course, for his floor, and Hartl against Philadelphia. I don't have too many standard price midfielders. I do like a lot of the premium options this week due to matchups, and they have decent floors. But McGlynn could be a decent shout against Seattle, as Seattle hasn't been too strong on the defensive side of things. Mihailovic, great floor. They're playing Portland. I feel like there's going to be a good amount of goals in that matchup. And then Pasalic for Orlando. Again, a good matchup against DC, and it'll only cost you about 8.3. Moving on to our budget midfielders. Not too many of them. I like Kasim for Nashville. I think he's on the wing, and he got a goal last week against Philly. Could be a sleeper pick, though he is a bit more expensive at 7.6. So more of a flyer type of pick here. Gengar for New York Red Bulls. Got 9 points last week. A goal and some bonus points as well. Really involved on the attack up there with Choupo-Moting. And they're playing Toronto, who aren't great defensively, so I like him at only a 6.5. Looking at our premium forwards, of course, Benteke, he is away at Orlando, but as I always say, Orlando lets in goals, so I feel like that's a great matchup for Benteke, and he's getting bonus points this year. And then Kuipers as well, he's been on some good form. Vancouver is not going to have all of their starters in, as well as some injuries, so it could be a good look for Chicago to score some goals here. And then Yeboah, I guess he might have picked up a knock, but yeah, keep an eye out on that Minnesota attack against the Galaxy. Looking at our standard priced forwards, so Peck is still racking up bonus points even if not scoring, and they're away at Minnesota, so a decent shout. Navarro, I like at home against Portland, great average points there, and he's only 8.8, so I like that matchup and I like the price. Zaha as well, Charlotte versus San Jose. I feel like Charlotte's starting to click a bit more. They will be without Ajiman up top, so keep an eye out on lineups, as well as Liel Abada. So we'll have to see what Charlotte is looking like, so maybe they will look to lean on Zaha a bit more. Some other guys not displayed here are Latte Loth with Atlanta, and I believe they have the early game. Yeah, so you could always throw him on the bench against Cincinnati and see his points. And our budget forwards, I've got Surridge from Nashville. So I've never really been one to look at Surridge from a fantasy standpoint, but he did get on the score sheet last week against Philly, You're playing Montreal, 7.7, not too expensive. Choupo-Moting is definitely getting a lot more involved. I think he got some bonus points even last week, so 9 points is great to see. And it looked like he was on penalties. I don't know if that's just because he won the penalty. We'll have to see. And then Mora as well, only 6.8. And they will be playing Colorado, who will be without Zach Steffen. So I'm expecting to see goals in that matchup. And yeah, Portland, I think, will only be missing, I feel like Lassiter's he's not even a starter really. So they shouldn't be too affected by call-ups. So yeah, keep an eye out on who's up on the attack in the forward spot for Portland. And looking at our captain's picks, so it is pretty fun. Messi and squad won't be playing this weekend, so not everyone will have to captain Messi. Yeah, so I like Evander. He's looking a lot better. That Cincinnati game versus Atlanta could be, a good amount of goals. And Evander or Cincinnati will only be missing Denke. Ojeda as well. I like the matchup against DC. And Mukhtar with Nashville against Montreal. So my philosophy for midfielders. So you'll notice my philosophy for captains is more along the lines of midfield, though I feel like strikers or forwards a lot more recently have been, racking up plenty of bonus points. I mean, look at Benteke this year rather. And the only thing is they are away at Orlando, so maybe he's still worth a look, Benteke for captaincy. But yeah, I like the midfielders for the most part when it comes to captain. I may be looking at Evander this week. So that wraps it up for me this week. So yeah, fingers crossed that week 5 or round 5 will be more in my favor than round 4, as it was rough, very rough for me, and I'm sure a lot of us who struggled on the defensive and keeper side of things. So yeah, a lot of good options this week. Gonna have to keep an eye out for international call-ups, Open Cup, all that fun stuff. This is the joy that is the MLS fantasy game for all of us sickos to enjoy. But that's what we do it for. We do it for fun, even though we do have some frustrating weeks here and there. But yeah, good luck everyone next week, and I hope this was helpful. See you.